From the underdog champion gaining confidence for the rematch, to the possibility of Kamaru Usman retiring after this fight, let's dive into everything that gives Rocky a competitive edge for his upcoming title defense. Leon goes into the fight knowing he has what it takes. People underestimate just how significant a confidence boost can be for a fighter, and how quickly it can affect their performance. Leon cemented himself as championship material by not only being the first to beat the Usman in the UFC, but he took pretty much everything from the Nigerian champ. He ended his winning streak and dethroned him from the pound-for-pound #1 ranking spot. But that was just the beginning. Edwards was able to become the first man to score a takedown on Usman, take his back, and threaten a submission. Even Chaos Colby couldn't take down Kamaru like that. UFC commentator and podcast legend Joe Rogan is an all-new Rocky fan after the knockout.
But that's not what he's made of. I think it was like not quitting. I think he was talking about Leon. See, there was a quote that he said right before Leon knocked him out. It was like he was kind of setting up that Leon's not going to quit.
And believes we'll see an even better Leon moving forward. We've seen it countless times in fighters like Robbie Lawler, Charles Oliveira, and even thug Rose Namajunas. Now that he's meeting his rival for a rematch, Edwards will go into the fight with much more belief in his abilities because he's just done it before. Rogan called it the championship rub a fighter gets once they break through the next level.
Look, Leon did it. He lives in Edmonton, grew up in Edmonton and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's, like I said, a trickle-down effect that's helping the kids, you know.
It was quite nerve-wracking, but once we got comfortable, you know, he was a good coach as well, holding the pads right and everything for me. It was quite an honour as well, you know.
It just means that I can do it as well. If they can do it, I can do it.
But losing the belt can have the exact opposite effect. Kamaru's head and confidence both took a major hit when he lost the belt. The fans took a long time to warm up to the Nigerian nightmare. They hated the wrestling forward style no matter how dominant it was, and just didn't find the champ as charismatic as the other fighters on the roster. As Rogan spoke to former UFC lightweight contender Paul Felder about the upcoming London fight card, he sounded skeptical at a fighter coming out unaffected after such a heavy loss, not just in a single fight, but because of what it represented for the Nigerian. Usman had to put on some scary performances to get the respect he believed he deserved from the UFC fans. He improved his striking, scored some knockouts, and was finally being respected as the pound-for-pound king, only to have Leon take everything from him. He was beating Leon too, dominating the entire fight except for the first round and the few seconds leading up to the head kick. Usman will never put together as long a win streak or as impressive a title reign. He's 35 years old, and the time comes for everybody. But ever since his knockout loss, Usman looks like the weight of the world has been removed from his shoulders. Kamaru may have lost some confidence, but he's also free of a ton of pressure, because the greatest of all time in a sport exerts a unique kind of pressure on an athlete that we mortals can't imagine. We saw the life John Jones and Tyson Fury spiraled into after they achieved everything they wanted. So the pitfalls into despair are frequent, and they're deep, but Kamaru stayed above all of that. We never saw a break in professionalism outside the cage. No scandals, no failed USADA tests, and no poor performances in the octagon for years. Tyrone Woodley lost the belt, lost 3 fights in a row after that, shifted to boxing, and fought Jake Paul twice, while Kamaru never even came close to losing. Keeping all that up is so mentally exhausting that when Usman came to the Joe Rogan Experience a few days after his knockout loss, he looked relieved to not have so many expectations to live up to. No deadline to beat Anderson's record, no perfect takedown defense to protect, and no 15-fight winning streak fogging his mind and protecting Usman's opponent from his complete focus. The former champion spoke so freely about the loss, laughing at the 20-minute nap Leon gave him, and admitting he thought he was the one setting up Leon while being the deer in the headlights. None of it seemed like he was taking more pressure for the rematch than he was for the original. Now that the worst had already happened, he was a free man, but now he has a much tougher challenge ahead of him. The London London crowds are going to make things much harder for Kamaru. Leon is the first Brit to hold a title since Bisping, making him a local hero who was coming home to defend the belt against the only man to beat him in recent memory. The Irish Dragon made an acute observation about European sporting crowds. They're nuts in the best way possible. Whenever the UFC visits the UK, it's a reminder that British fans are easily some of the best in the world, and now they're going to be behind their champ. Felder thinks that's something else the former champ has to worry about, even though he's faced hostile crowds before. When local stars like Paddy the Baddy fought in the UK this past year, the entire crowd continuously chanted slogans throughout the fight. That's really distracting if you aren't used to European crowds. And the pressure you feel from 20,000 people yelling "they hate" probably sucks. But if you're a local hero like Leon, it can be a superpower. The familiarity of fighting in your home country boosts your confidence anyway, but a different fight venue from last time has more advantages than you might think. London has an altitude much better suited for Rocky. Usman vs. Leon 2 was booked in Salt Lake City, a venue that's 2,000 meters above sea level. For those who don't know how that affects an athlete, the higher above sea level you go, the more it affects your cardio. Fighters get tired much faster than they would otherwise, and Leon has been pretty open about how much it hurt him last time. The first round went very well for the challenger. He took Usman down and dominated him on the ground, but then his energy levels dropped considerably. Edwards didn't even look like he had complete control over himself, as his movements felt sluggish as the fight went on. But that's not going to be a problem in London, and I imagine that does wonders for Leon's confidence too. I'm sure Usman is going to come prepared, wary of any traps he might fall into, like the first fight, but I think Leon had to rely on the setup that won him the belt because he was too tired to establish consistent pressure. Sure, the lower altitude benefits Kamaru too, but the Nigerian has always been famous for his never-ending stamina and didn't even look fatigued the last time the two fought. However, there's something Joe Rogan forgot to consider during his prediction. Win or lose, this may be Kamaru's last fight in the UFC. Usman hasn't given the fans any sign that he's ready to call it a career, but hear me out. Kamaru doesn't have anything left to achieve in the sport. The Nigerian has already crossed GSP's records in the welterweight division, won every accolade the UFC has, and is a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. If he wins, he can go down as one of the best fighters ever, and if he loses the rubber match, I don't think there's any place for him to go. He's never wanted to move up to middleweight because of his fellow Nigerian champion Israel, and Usman is way too big to move to lightweight. He could go in box, a shift increasingly popular with UFC champions, and something Usman's shown interest in. The pressure of looming retirement ups the stakes for Usman and adds even more pressure to the monumental task ahead of him. Well, folks, there's everything that's going to make the rubber match an easier fight for Rocky.